almost exactly like the MS, but this 9 credits, you're allowed up to 6 credits of business courses instead. So here, you're not allowed in the MS to take business courses. So if you take, let's say, organizational behavior or technological leadership and stuff, via the MS part won't allow it. BSMS definitely won't allow it, but MEng would. Why is that? Imagine doing a mini MBA. That's the MEng. That's the rationale behind the MEng. So if you want a little bit of managerial abilities under your belt and the technical chops at a graduate level, the MEng is perfect, right? But there's no BSMS version of it. It's just MEng. And the other thing is, because they have different names, don't think that one is worth less than the other. Everything's the same. If you get a master's, you get a master's. It carries a lot of weight regardless, and it's the same level of responsibility. PhD, you can get into the PhD program right away after BS. I wouldn't recommend it. I would suggest that you do your MS degree first, and then you do your PhD. And the reason is, let's say, because if you do straight from BS into PhD, it's approximately 5.5 years. Lots of things can happen in 5.5 years. And so let's say something happens very traumatically somewhere in your 3rd or 4th year, and you drop out of the grad program, you have nothing to show for it. If you do MS, get your master's degree, and then go to your PhD, and let's say things don't pan out, or funding runs out, or you have the MS degree in your hand, right? PhD also, don't think that if you make a lot of money going from BS into the MS or MEng realm, that, oh my God, I'll make a killing if I go from master's into PhD. Yeah, don't think like that. You know, trust me. Like, you know, I use to drive a Toyota Corolla, and then let's just say I don't drive a Mercedes with gold wheels and spinners and stuff like that. No. But the PhD is great because you can become a professor, you can become a researcher. In a lot of cases, it just gives you that additional deep insight. So with me, wireless comms was all in. So I just jumped headfirst into the wireless comms world, and I love it. I don't care about making lots of money, but then I love also teaching. I love interacting with folks. When I did my sabbatical leave at Meyer last year, it was a wonderful experience, but there was something I missed. I missed interacting with folks, right? My grad students, my undergraduate students, everyone. So PhD is really designed for folks who are keen on really getting some depth into research and who are interested in, let's say, being a professor later on or teaching. Even if you don't want to be a professor, but you want to teach at a university, adjunct and stuff, more and more I'm seeing a lot of folks having PhDs in order to do that job. Okay? Yes?
Just some information on the PhD.
Yeah.
Because I have a friend who's doing PhD right now.
Yeah.
After he finished the bachelor degree last year, and he said that for the first 2 years PhD study, he studied some master courses, and then at the end of the 2nd year, he needed to take some tests, and that would be equivalent of having a master degree.
At WPR?
Yes.
I haven't heard that. What happens is after 30 credits of your PhD program, if you come straight from a BS, you have 30 and 60. And it really depends on the situation. What I do, when I have a lot of international students, they come in for a PhD, but they have a BS degree, and they come in for a PhD. After 30 credits, I say, whatever research you've done, write a thesis. And then they have a master's degree in hand, but some professors don't do that. So there is that option, but it's not. But for the most part, I always suggest going in for your MS, because let's say you want to go to another school. That's what I did. I actually did my MS at another school, and then I said, PhD, I'd rather go to this school. And stuff. And it's very tricky if you do all in one shot. So, yep.
So I know it's probably very dependent on the school, but I just want to know if you have heard any stories. If you get your master's, let's just say here,
yep.
And then you go off and do a PhD somewhere else, do you know if you have to go through taking the GREs and all that? Because you've already proven that you've done master's and graduate level work.
So how about your question just, it basically brings up the sort of words of advice I want to bring up. So that's an excellent question. So first of all, to answer your question, depends on the school. Some schools like MIT don't require GRE. They just say, standardized tests. Okay, so these guys spend a long time, they get 800, or whatever the number is now. My advice is never apply blind. What I would do is develop a relationship with whoever you're planning to do your graduate studies under their advisorship. So, like, if you want to do a master's degree, and let's say it's not a WPI, but let's say it's at Northeastern, or BU, or RPI, or it could be WPI. The key is to talk with the professor first, see eye to eye, and say, okay, I think this will work. I think I have the funding, I want to. And say, and it's a two-way interview. It's like, I think he's not crazy. I think this is going to be a great graduate student professor relationship. And then what happens is then submit the application. In my life, I've never submitted the application before I got like pretty much confirmation that the professor will take me. I knew one student a few years ago, and I remember it clearly because I wrote 25 letter recommendations for the 25 grad schools that he applied to. And I don't think he got into any of them. I said, hey, did you reach out to a specific professor and say, like, and try to develop that relationship? Never happened. Never did that. So what you need to do is do the homework. Like, what are you interested in? See the professors on, the websites. When I was at a conference a few weeks ago in Vancouver, there was a guy from China next to me, and that's exactly what he said. Oh, here's all the EC professors at USC, and Berkeley, and Stanford, and was like finding email addresses, and I think he was interested in nano. So he's just like copying email addresses and preparing emails and such. Be careful also not to sound too cut and paste like. I get emails like 20, 30 a day from folks all over the world saying, dear Professor Alexander M. Wyglinski, and then lots of nice T's. And I am really interested in his exact copy of all my research interests. So, and and then it's like, I also need funding. I hope you have funding, blah, blah, blah. Sign, have a good day. And the thing is, it doesn't really connect to me. We want someone that will stick out, that actually did research on me, and likewise develops that relationship that says, I would love to call you on Skype. So nowadays with Skype, there is no geographic restriction. Right? So the personal relationship is absolutely vital, especially if you want funded graduate studies in the like. And what you mentioned about doing your master's here and doing your PhD elsewhere, that works really well. Like, I think you want to avoid as much as possible, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Doing all your degrees at the same place. I actually switched it up. I did my undergrad at McGill, I did my master's at Queen's, I did my PhD at McGill. And so I saw two different universities, got some perspective. And then I did my first professor job at the University of Kansas. It was not tenure. And then I came to WPI. So I began seeing the world a little bit and sort of give some breadth. But you absolutely need to develop that relationship with whoever you want to, and it almost always works. Like, there's several students who did that. They reached out to professors and they say, I'm really interested in antenna design. I noticed that you design antennas for radar systems, and then I did my MQP on that. And usually and WPI students have a great reputation, right? So one thing you could do is if you can get your name, if you can produce a peer-reviewed scholarly paper, like a conference paper or journal paper, or even like a magazine article with a professor that you're doing your MQP with or on your own with an ISP, that speaks volumes. Because whenever you say, oh, I have a peer-reviewed publication, it's fantastic, right? So, I'm trying to think of anything else. Yes?
So how long does the MSIM take?
So people take 2 years. So if it's BSMS, I think almost all of them are 1 year, unless they do it like 6 credits a semester. One thing is you can also take grad courses during the summer, and therefore you can also shrink things down to a year, even if you spread it out 6 credits, but then you don't have a summer. So it's a trade-off, right? But BSMS is great because in 1 year, you're done with your master's, you possibly can have a thesis, and there is no difference between a BSMS master's and a regular master's. So if you want to do your PhD after, you apply for your PhD program, and that's fine. either with your own professor that advises you for your master's or elsewhere. Trying to think what else is there. Any other questions? Burning questions about grad studies? Yes?
You mentioned like there's no BSMS or MH. What can you do to carry forward the English knowledge?
So that's the thing. So it's essentially transferring credit that is unused by your BS degree over to the MN degree. That's totally legit. So if you have some extra grad courses, absolutely. So and that's the thing, because there is something to be said about, like, again, time is money. So don't, on the one hand, you don't want to rush through your graduate or undergraduate experience, but at the same time, you don't want to sort of drag things out. You want to learn, but you want to learn in a timely manner, but not too rushed, but not too slowly. Right? There's a balance. But everybody has a different rate. Right? Anything else? Any other questions? I mean, these are great questions. I think if you have any others, feel free to email me. Probably the best thing, because I'm a moving target. So somebody sees me in the hallway and is like, hi, sort of thing. But I think again, if you need help crafting an email to reach out to a professor, or if you need help doing research on finding, a professor that matches your needs, because I've seen a lot of times people are saying, I would love to do stuff in nano MEMS technology, something or other. I say, what the heck is that? Well, Google is a good start. And then it's what are you looking for? And also the most important thing is setting up that interview with that professor. Because one thing people don't realize is the interview is a two-way street. You're trying to size up the professor, and one of the things that I think is the biggest culprit, so last thing before we end, one of the biggest things that's a culprit for a relationship between a graduate student and professor falling into pieces is when there's a personality clash or mismatch, right? So I've seen too many times, graduate student, professor, there's a misunderstanding, and it just gets worse and worse and worse, and the relationship falls apart, and the graduate student doesn't finish their degree, right? And what you want to do is at the get-go, see if the professor has a style, an advising style, and that the professor sees your work style and your interest jive. Right? It's very, very important. I think graduate studies is definitely, there's a lot of things in terms of how you're being mentored and the communications with that mentor, rather than, you're going to do great work. If you're accepted into a graduate program, that's great, but finding that person that will mentor you is quite important too. So if you have any other questions, Alex W is the contact. Just drop me an email if you want me to look over a draft email that you're going to reach out to folks with. If you're interested more about the NSF Graduate Studies Research Fellowship Program, any draft proposals or anything, any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop me an email. Yes?
So